Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu, and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT9, and BT9 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be a brand new iteration of the Aguubond deck. So yes, Agumon Bond of Bravery is still a relatively powerful deck, and we do have a couple of different ways to be able to approach the deck given the current meta. I think right now, because everything is kind of high damage, the best thing that we could do is not necessarily try to match the high damage with our Bond of Bravery, because unfortunately he doesn't have as high of a damage ceiling as something like his counterpart in the form of Agumon, but he does have his own form of aggression, and we want to go lower to the ground, and we still have lots of good ways to be able to deal lots of damage relatively quickly, and that's kind of the core strength that we're going to be leaning into, with Bond of Bravery actually acting more so as a win condition or punish tool rather than something we're actively trying to go up into. So with all that said and done, onto the actual profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Koromon. So this is the BT5 Koromon, and this is going to be the draw engine of the deck because, well, we need to draw cards and make our deck as consistent as possible, especially since we're a more low-to-the-ground aggro deck and we're not necessarily going to be evolving all that often. So what this card is doing is it has a nice when attacking ability once per turn. If this Digimon is an Omnimon or a Greymon, then we get to draw 1 card. So again, it's just helping the overall flow of the deck. And then the last Digitama could really be anything you want it to be just because it is the 5th Digitama, but I'm going to be running 1 copy of Koromon just because the BT9 version of Koromon is one of the best DP boosters for the deck. So it has this nice ability where during your turn, while this Digimon is an Agumon or a Greymon, then it gets plus 1000 DP, so it can even make our lower level Digimon aggressive if we want to, but it's mostly just there to try to help DP boost our mid-level Digimon to be sure that they're going to be as powerful as they possibly can be. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Agumon Expert. So Agumon Expert is kind of a flex spot for the deck. You could swap this out with any other digging tool, but I do value the recyclability of what we can do with this card. So it has the on-play ability where we get to return 1 Digimon with Agumon in its name from our trash back into our hand. So this could be any of our Agumons. Mainly, we're going to be wanting to use this with our core Agumon from BT6 and our Agumon Bond of Bravery, so that way we'll always have access to those cards. And speaking of our BT6 Agumon, next I'm going to be running 4 copies of Agumon. So the BT6 Agumon is the core Agumon. This is the most important Agumon in the whole deck, or at least one of them, just because it has the nice all-turns ability while it's sitting passively on our field, where once per turn, when we play a Tamer with Tai Kamiya in its name, then we get to gain 1 memory, allowing our Tamers to be a little bit more memory efficient, which is usually a good thing, making them easier to play. Then this is the best card to combo off with our Bond of Bravery, just because it's giving our Bond of Bravery security attack, because during your turn, as an inheritable, while this Digimon is Agumon Bond of Bravery, then it gets security attack +1 in case we actually want to try to aggress it with our Bond of Bravery. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Agumon. So this is the Classic Collection version of Agumon, and this is going to be one of the deck's core digging tools. So it has the nice when attacking ability where once per turn, we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck and then add 1 Tamer or 1 Digimon with Agumon in its name from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So this is just helping look for, well, our Tamers and our other Agumons, mainly our Agumon Bond of Bravery, and it could even hit Agumon Expert because it's just asking for Agumon in its name, making him just a good consistency tool. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Agumon. So this is the starter deck version of Agumon. If you wanted to, you could swap this out with the promo version of Agumon or the other starter deck version of Agumon. It doesn't necessarily matter. The whole role of this specific Agumon is just to try to help DP boost our Digimon to make them a little bit stronger than they normally would be. So I like this Agumon the best just because it could work with all of our cards, because when we attack the opponent using this inheritable, then this Digimon gains plus 2000 DP for the turn, making it just one of the easiest ones to get that DP boost with, and one of the larger DP boosts compared to some of the others. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Agunimon. So Agunimon is going to be that hybrid win factor, just because if we break all of the opponent's security, we have extra memory to play around with, then we could digivolve one of our Tamers that's unsuspended into our hybrid and be able to swing for the game that way. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of the Promo Greymon. So the Promo Greymon is an absolutely fantastic card for what this deck is doing, just because this is the card that's allowing us to be so low to the ground and so aggressive. So during your turn, while this Digimon has an Agumon in its Digivolution source, then it gains Security Attack +1. So we could use this in combination with almost any of our Agumons except for Agumon Expert, because it's not an Agumon, it's an Agumon Expert. But I digress, and the fact that we're going to be using this card as the main key aggro point makes it really, really strong, just because it's going to be a level 4 that's possibly hitting for 2 checks. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Greymon. So this is another flex spot for the deck. It doesn't necessarily have to be the starter Greymon if you don't want it to be, but I do like starter Greymon just because I am running a level 5, and this could help combo with that level 5 to make our level 5 even stronger. But if you want to run any other card in this card slot, then by all means do so, that you feel like would be beneficial. But what this card is doing is it just has a nice generic inheritable ability of giving whatever's going to be digivolving on top of them Security Attack Plus, so that way we could try to make our level 5s even more aggressive than they normally would be as well. And then the last level 4 of the deck is going to be 4 copies of GeoGreymon. So this is the starter deck version of GeoGreymon, and this is actually a pretty underrated card. So he is a security Digimon, so at the end of the battle, we get to play this card for free, which is always pretty good, especially since he has a nice on-play ability where we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP or less. So just the surprise factor of a Digimon coming onto the field is pretty good, so that way we could then digivolve him into our level 5 and be able to apply lots of pressure relatively easily with. But even without just digivolving him into a level 5, he's still a Greymon by name to be able to trigger our Koromon with, and we do have some other cute combo plays that this card allows us to do. Next, on to the level 5s, I'm going to be running 4 copies of SkullGreymon. So SkullGreymon is another really solid card to try to help keep us as low to the ground and as aggressive as we can possibly be. So he just naturally has Security Attack +1, so he's just already going to be hitting for 2 checks. So the idea is we're going to be comboing him with the starter deck Greymon to be able to deal 3 checks off of this one card. Then he has a nice ability where at the end of the attack, we have to delete this Digimon to trigger his on-delete ability, where we get to play 1 Agumon from our trash suspended without paying its memory cost, and we have some pretty decent Agumons that we want to get on our field to be able to combo with later. So just sitting on this card and trying to threaten the possibility of dealing lots of damage is still going to be a huge threat for the opponent, because they're going to still have to deal with his on-delete ability, even if you choose not to attack with this card right away, to be able to deal lots of damage very quickly. And just as an FYI, no, you will not be able to revive Agumon Bond of Bravery using SkullGreymon, because his on-delete ability is just looking for Agumons. So if you wanted to include an on-play Agumon that's not Agumon Expert, then this is a good card to combo with that to be able to get that on-play ability as well. And then the last Digimon of the deck is going to be the only level 7 and only Mega, which is going to be 3 copies of Agumon Bond of Bravery. So Agumon Bond of Bravery isn't necessarily helping us try to OTK the opponent, because that's not what this deck is trying to do. He has a nice win attacking ability where if we have a Tamer in play, we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 13,000 DP or less, which is really good because that feeds into his secondary part of the ability, which is why we're running him as a good win condition, where during your turn, once per turn, when an opponent's Digimon is deleted, then we get to trash out 1 card from the top of the opponent's security stack. So ideally, even if we leave the opponent at 1 security, they just have a Digimon sitting vulnerable on the field, we could warp into Agumon Bond of Bravery, swing, delete the opponent's Digimon, and then delete the opponent's security, and basically that's going to be swinging for the game, which is what's making him a really good and powerful win condition. Next, on to the options, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Lightning Joust. So Lightning Joust is another card to try to help us deal lots of damage relatively quickly. So its main ability states that one of our Digimon gets plus 2000 DP for the turn, increasing their DP, which is increasing their overall chance of survival, and we want them to survive as much as we possibly can, because most of the time what we're going to be aggressing with is going to have a decent amount of Security Tac Plus, which this card also can add Security Tac Plus to, with the second part of its ability, where if the number of cards in our security is lower than or equal to the opponent's, then one of our Digimon gains Security Tac Plus. So it's just helping with the overall damage output of the deck to be able to put lots of pressure on the opponent to try to end the game as quickly as we possibly can. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Tactical Retreat. So Tactical Retreat is a pretty interesting card in this deck specifically, just because it's something the opponent might not be expecting. We do have a red-yellow Tamer to be able to actually start thinking about using yellow options, so Tactical Retreat is just one of the best yellow options that we could use with this deck. So not only does it have a low play cost, but it has the main ability where we get to place one Digimon on our field to the top of our security stack face down, and then trash all of the Digivolution sources underneath that Digimon. So we could use this in combination with GeoGreymon to be able to swing with our GeoGreymon, and if GeoGreymon lives, then we could use Tactical Retreat to put him back into our security, effectively healing us, while reloading our security with a security threat. On top of the fact that we could use this with some various other cards, like our Bond of Bravery. So if we know our Bond of Bravery is going to be dying due to the effect of our Tai Kamiya, then we could just Tactical Retreat him away, which is absorbing the negative effect of being able to Digivolve into that Bond relatively early, and we do have Agumon Expert as a card to be able to fish out our Bond even in our trash, which is the whole point on why I'm running Agumon Expert. So this card just has lots of solid combo potential to be able to mitigate a lot of downsides of some of our various card effects. Then on top of that, it has a nice security effect of its own to help us recover 1, making it a really good card to play in this style of deck, since the bonds do tend to deal damage to themselves. And then the last option of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Sunrise Buster. So Sunrise Buster is one of the best removal option cards that we could have ever hoped for this style of deck, just because it has the ability where we get to play a red or yellow Tamer from our hand for free, which is what we're trying to do because we need to set up our Tamers to be able to make our plays as effective as we possibly can. And not only is it helping set up our Tamers, but it also has the ability where then we get to have one of the opponent's Digimon get minus 3000 DP for each red and yellow Tamer that we have in play. So the more Tamers that we have in play, then the larger the target that we could possibly remove through DP reduction, and then its security ability is activating its main, so even in security, it's just a nice threatening card to use to try to control and mitigate the opponent's field while setting up our field all at the same time. And then lastly, onto the Tamers, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Marcus. So this is kind of the memory fixing flex spot for the deck. It could really be any Tamer that you want that's going to be hard setting our memory to 3 at the start of our turn if it's ever less than 3. I like Marcus versus some of the others just because it has a higher usability than most of the other red memory fixing Tamers for this style of deck, just because it has nice Greymon synergy and interactions. So during your turn, when one of your Digimon with Greymon in its name attacks, then we get to suspend this Tamer to gain a memory, and we could use that memory to be able to enhance and extend some of our plays or make some of our other cards a little bit more efficient to use just because we're manipulating our memory via Tamer. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Tai Kamiya. So Tai Kamiya is an absolutely insane card for how this deck wants to work because, well, it's just making our bond as playable as it possibly can be, and what's allowing us to warp into our bond to begin with. So he has a nice ability where at the start of your turn, when a Digimon with Agumon or Greymon in its name moves out of our racing area into the battle area, then we get to gain a memory, draw 1 card, acting as a really solid resource engine for the deck as well. And on top of that, like I stated before, it's what's allowing our bond to be playable, because its main ability states that once per turn, we could Digivolve one of our Agumons into an Agumon Bond of Bravery from our hand by paying its Digivolution cost and ignoring its level requirements. Then if we do, we have to trash the top 2 cards of our security stack. Then if we have 1 or more cards in our security, we have to delete that Digimon at the end of the turn. So the price for going up into a bond is sacrificing 2 of our security, but that's why a card like Tactical Retreat is so good, because it allows us to aggress it relatively early and only potentially sacrifice one memory, because we could Tactical Retreat the bond away because it's just going to be deleted anyway. On top of the fact that with BT6 Agumon, we can make him cost potentially 2 instead of 3, so he's just a super efficient tamer to use as well. And then the last tamer and card of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Tai Kamiya. So Tai Kamiya is a red-yellow dual tamer that's helping with our memory management, and it's actually helping the survivability of our Digimon when we're aggressing onto the opponent. So not only is this card acting as the yellow source to be able to utilize our yellow options, but it also has some really solid memory generation for how this deck wants to play, because at the start of your turn, if you have 3 or fewer cards in your security, then we get to gain 1 memory, which we could easily set up with our bond if we really wanted to do a bond play early, or if the opponent has 3 or fewer cards in their security, then we also get to gain a memory, which is going to be another super easy setup because we could just chip at the opponent's security with our mid-level Digimon with security attack +1 to be able to put them at that 3 mark super quickly. Then it also has a nice ability where during your turn, when one of your red or yellow Digimon attacks, we get to suspend this tamer to have all of the opponent's security Digimon get minus 2000 DP for the turn. So it's almost like a pseudo buff to our Digimon, making it so that they're going to have an easier time swinging into the opponent's security. And the more Tai and Karis that we have on the field, the more instances of both of these abilities we'll be able to gain for a lot of potential memory or a lot of potential DP reduction on the opponent's security. And another crazy part to making this card extra usable is the fact that it is a Tai Kamiya to be able to combo with our BT6 Agumon to help play it for 3 instead of 4, which is, again, making it just more tempo and memory efficient. And then there's still just a whole bunch of different tech and tools that you can incorporate into the deck, all depending on what you're actually trying to gain out of the deck. So if you wanted to, we do have a whole bunch of different Agumons that you could play. We even have an on-play Agumon that you could try to use in combination with your SkullGreymon, and the BT1 Agumon is really good with his on-play ability to help try to dig out our Tamers, which we are running a decent amount of Tamers to make this card super good. Or if you just want some good DP boosting, then you could also run the promo Agumon if you are going to be more hardlined into this Greymon focused style, just because the 2000 DP boost extends to the Greymons, which is the vast majority of our cards, and that's just what we're going to be aggressing with more often than not. And you also have the starter deck Agumon as just a generic 1000 DP boost for anything, so there is different DP boost options for you to think about utilizing. Then there is still just a couple of different level 4s that you could run in the deck. So you could run Flamedramon as just an Armor Digimon, so that way you could try to swing, be aggressive with that Armor Digimon, and then Armor Purge back into an Agumon to then line up a Warp play. Or you could run something as simple as a Deltamon, just because it has some really good stats for us to use as an aggressive level 4 Digimon. Or you could run some various different Greymons if you wanted to, depending on the meta and matchups that you're trying to look to gain. And then we do have some solid level 5s that we also could think about utilizing, so you don't necessarily need to run the X Antibody option and the whole X Antibody line. We could just run a Metal Greymon and Metal Greymon X to have some good aggression on some solid level 5s. Or if you wanted to, you could try to incorporate the Rise package as well, just because you could run Rise Greymon and Rise Greymon X Antibody to be able to play our Tamers for free and have another really aggressive level 5 that's going to be trying to present the opponent with consistent pressure, while this card is also boosting himself by the number of Tamers that we play. And again, both the Red Rise and the Rise X are going to help us play our Tamers to set up our field of Tamers to be able to use them as effectively and efficiently as we possibly can. Then we do have the various different plugins that we could run. So we could run High Speed plugin to gain jamming and unblockable to make sure that we're going to be hitting the opponent's security and hitting it as safely as we possibly can, especially with the added security attack plus that we're going to try to give our cards, or our cards would naturally have. Or if you wanted to, you could run the red plugin just because we could give even more security attack plus just to try to deal some extra damage. Even though I don't like it as much as Lightning Joust, it's still a good budget replacement just because it has its own pros and cons. Then we do have a card like Rowdy Rocker to try to act as some good card draw, and Rowdy Rocker is a really good card to synergize and interact with trying to have some good inheritables on our level 4, like our starter deck Greymon if you really wanted to, so that way we could try to tuck our starter deck Greymon underneath another stack to be able to increase the overall damage output of our deck, while also allowing us to try to draw some additional cards to help with the consistency of the deck. But if you're just looking for added consistency to the deck, then we do have a card like Fireball, where most of the time this is just going to be used as an early game draw too, and if we really do needed to delete one of the opponent's low-level Digimon, then it could help us do that as well. And speaking of removal, we do just have a whole bunch of different removal options in red that we could lean into, all depending on the type of removal that you're going to be valuing. And because we are splashing in a red-yellow duo tamer, we also have access to even more yellow options. So if you wanted to, you could just run a slew of different yellow options to either act as removal or more recovery based on what you're valuing out of the deck. But for the most part, this is just my interpretation of a really solid core or shell for what Aguubond could be doing in BT9. I don't think this deck is going to be hyper tier 1 meta competitive, but it definitely can take the opponent by surprise just because of how aggressive we can be, and we could even kind of play this into a slight OTK kind of a deck where we're just going to be lining up a field of lots of different very strong powerful attacks to try to break the opponent's security all in one turn with our multiple different Digimon. That line of play is a little bit less safe than just trying to go for the damage while we have it on the field, but it's still possible if the opponent isn't necessarily doing anything to counteract that type of play, and that could be a huge strength and benefit for making this deck super good and super playable on top of all of the different combo plays, synergies, and interactions we already have and are running with this style of deck. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.